The familiars of the Common Republic are beings often associated with powerful entities like gods, witches, and even superpowered humans. The familiars often help the heroes in combat. It might be to help channel their powers, to help defeat powerful opponents, to perform tedious tasks, or to take out small fries while the wielder sits back and enjoys the show. The top 10 most powerful familiars in the Common Republic includes the Lesser Iphri. This is a familiar of the god Iphri, a lesser member of the first race. This familiar made its first appearance in the Might of Guardian Prime issue 7, where the god Iphri was engaged in combat with the Union Guard, a manufactured superhero of the United States in the Common Republic universe. Anyways, during this battle, the Union Guard used the power of his base Epsilon to create a powerful blast of electricity, hitting the god with it, only for him to tank the entire blast and emerge victorious from the smoke. The Union Guard is visibly worn out after this exertion, and the god begins speaking to him. I see you have some fight in you. From official marks, I see you are from the Orisha's domain, west of Niger, so I shall speak their tongue. You have shown yourself worthy of my Lesser Iphri. Avatar of aggression, Lesser Iphri. The Lesser Iphri is not just one familiar, it is a group of different entities that act as one and can be controlled as a collective. They look like humanoid idols carved from inanimate objects, and they all have distinct features and forms. They can be summoned by the member of the Alusi, Ivory, and given orders on how to act in any way the summoner wishes. The order given to the Lesser Iphri this time is aggress, and upon receiving these orders, the Lesser Iphri went on the attack and constantly bombarded the Union Guard with little attacks. It seemed almost like a death by 1,000 cuts, and we realized just how tiny the Lesser Iphri are. Just after that though, Guardian Prime rushes in and destroys every one of them, rescuing the Union Guard from the jaws of death, but not before he takes out the other familiar on this list. The Ultimate Iphri. This is almost like the Lesser Iphri but larger, like way larger. The Ultimate Iphri was summoned after the Guardian Prime began beating the brakes off of the lesser member of the first race called Ivory. Guardian Prime was knocking him into so many different zip codes so fast and feeding him hot knuckle sandwiches that he had to call the senior Iphri for help. Amidst the barrage or flurry of blows the Guardian Prime was landing on the god, he let out a terrifying scream summoning the Ultimate Iphri. Immediately it arrived, we see its full form, a giant humanoid statue that seemed to appear from nowhere, and instantly the Guardian Prime used this chance to slam this god he was currently whooping into the giant idol he just summoned. He used his powers to send a powerful blast of fire towards the Ultimate Iphri and destroyed it instantly. Unfortunately, we never got to see the full extent of the power of the Ultimate Iphri because Guardian Prime destroyed it as soon as it arrived. But if I had to take a wild guess, I'll say it has the same ability as the Lesser Iphri, taking orders from the summoner and unleashing slash attacks on its opponents. But maybe we'll never know. Irin. This is the next familiar on the list, and is one that has never really shown a lot of its abilities, probably because it belongs to the most party-loving forger god. Irin makes her first appearance in the Visionary issue 4, where the god of lightning Shango intensifies his invasion of Egone, trying to fight his main rival again. He is interrupted by the arrival of Ogun, who brought his familiar with him. Irin is by his side and she acts more like a servant that helps to pour out their drinks than a combat type servant. We don't know if she has combat capabilities though, but it is highly unlikely. One other important thing to note is that it is stated that she is the eldest of his familiars, meaning he has more familiars apart from her, but these familiars had never been introduced to us or even mentioned. The only one of Obu's familiars we have seen is Irin, but we don't really know if the eldest title given to her means that she is the strongest or that she is the favorite of the god of iron. The only task I have seen her perform is pour out palm wine for the two Orishas during their meeting. Ajija. This is the familiar of the god of the hunt, Ojochi. He is the only familiar of this body hopper god that we know of, and he seems to be the most useful familiar when it comes to the concept of their gods. Ojochi is the god of the hunt, and Itosono is the power of the Ajija, the dust devil. Itosono means direction, and with this power of direction, Ojochi never misses his targets. This is a very useful ability for the god of the hunt. His attacks always hit his target thanks to this familiar. The first time we see this familiar is in the Visionary issue 1, where Damoli Ajanaku is deep in sleep, and in this sleep, he was following a large group of souls into the gates of Asher before we see the purple man, the dust devil, pull him back to reality using a white robe, saying, "Young master, it is not yet time." The way Ajija works is quite mysterious. His power is always active, but you rarely ever see him physically or mentally. This is demonstrated when you notice how he acts with Damole, who was using the power of the god of the hunt residing in him to see spirits and other paranormal entities. The familiar will stay completely out of sight, but will rain attacks on the violent spirits that will notice Damole can see them. Also, Ajija completely stayed out of sight when Ojokshi uses his powers to hit the demon summoned by Ifagemi. He wasn't even looking at the monster he was aiming at. The Purple Dust Devil Ajija is a really unique familiar. The first time we see it fully was in the mind of Damode Ajanaku after Oya released the seal of Eru, the Idols of Fear. Ojokshi confronts Damole and informs him he was going to be taking over his body, and like most members of the first race, he sent his familiar to go before him. And Ajija the Dust Devil can be seen spitting out a cloud of purple dust, and it filled the little boy's mind as he, the god of the hunt, takes over. We don't really know if the powerful arrow attacks are a manifestation of the power of the god of the hunt, or strictly that of the familiar, or if the powerful arrow attacks were from the god of the hunt, Ojokshi, but uses the power of Watersona to guide the arrows to their targets. The latter one is the most likely, but either one greatly affects the familiar scaling. This doesn't really affect the status of the god of the hunt though, because the familiar's powers come from the god of the hunt in the first place. Shadow. This is the weapon and familiar of the Norse god of light, Thor. He made his first appearance in the Vanguard Overwatch series issue 4, where Shango and Guardian Prime were present, both of them for different reasons. The Guardian Prime was there to retrieve the meaning of life, while Shango was just there to protect his territory. Thor arrived in a flurry of lightning and engages Shango in battle, with his weapons Jangripper, Mejinjor, and Mignor. During the battle, Shango takes his mighty hammer from him, and he proceeds to summon his hound familiar, Fenrir, to bind his opponent to his ultimate fate. In his very first entrance, you can see Fenrir on his shoulder like an animal pelt. Anyways, after summoning Fenrir, he tells Shango to release his hammer before setting his hand on him. The wolf charged at Shango, but he used the hammer to slam it backwards. He charges up to him again, but Shango grabs the familiar by the teeth, slams it into the ground, and forces the hammer into his mouth. This greatly provoked Thor, who came flying back into the fight, only to be defeated as well. Fenrir doesn't have much feat in this instant though, but that's probably because they were going against one of the strongest orishas in the verse. Being able to struggle with Shango is in and of itself a feat. Although struggle is not really the right word to use here, it's impressive either way. Fenrir is one of the most aggressive animal-like familiar that is worthy of being summoned in a battle between high-ranking members of the first race. Egbede. This is the familiar of a god of the Alusi, the king of Enuigwe Amadioha. He's one of the most chill and friendly familiars we know of. He also doubles as a plushie toy, pet, and bodyguard for the god's young daughter, and he often complains about the tasks he is forced to perform and the form he is forced to take by the stone father. But when the time comes to lock in and display powers, you can see that he's not one to mess with. One such occasion we see happened in Amadioha series, issue 2, where we see Amadioha break his oath of non-interference in the Hani community that was being exploited by oil corporations and armed rebel groups were going to attack it, leading to more conflicts. In this same issue, we see Amadioha summon his familiar Egbede from halfway across the state. Egbede turns into lightning, then teleports to the Stormfather's side and transforms into the Allfather's staff. Using this staff, Amadioha calls forth a great deal of lightning from the sky and slams the entire thing onto the ground. What resulted from this was a gigantic piece of lightning that was so huge it completely enveloped and dwarfed the entire oil rig, as well as the combatant elements at the scene. During this scene, we see Amadioha communicating with his familiar Egbede saying, "Use my totems, send them." The most impressive part of all this is that all the elements of the conflict were not destroyed, but instead transported to different locations all over the country Nigeria. Even the oil pollutants that contaminated the water were transported, all done by channeling the power of the god through his diligent familiar, Egbede. Mono. This is a familiar of Shango, one of So actually. This is the only familiar of Shango that we have not seen in the series even up to now. The reason why this takes the fourth position is strictly because of the reputation of the wielder. Shango is one of the most powerful members of the first race to ever exist, and I don't see any other familiar on this list defeating one of these familiars. Although the familiars of Shango have been progressively stronger as they are being reviewed, I still decided to keep this at this number because we have not actually seen any feats from it yet. It was first mentioned in the Visionary issue 1, where Shango was summoned by the NACSS. Ala. This is the very first familiar of Shango that we see. It is always in his physical form, following the king of Kosu everywhere he goes, flying beside him. One might even say it is his favorite familiar, as it's an embodiment of the roaring tempest of rage and aggression crackling as lightning inside of him. She can also turn herself into armor and his weapon or Shoshango for him. That might be the reason she's always on standby. Her ult includes a wide range of attacks of lightning blasts, a downpour that can dismantle an entire army, or a teeming forest. She is also aggressive, loud-mouthed, and quite badly behaved, but she does listen to her master every time he says to go before his arrival. She's been used in battles to fight against the god of the Huns in time past, usually the Stone Guardians of Ingole, Apata, a self of the owner of Ingole, Thor, the thunder god of the Norsemen, and many other opponents we don't know of yet. She is one of the most popular familiars in the entire Comet Republic. This is another familiar of the king of Koso, the god of fire and lightning, Shango. This familiar first seen in the visionary issue 3, where Shango's other familiar, Ara, was getting her ass handed to her by Apata. Shango summoned the personification of his fiery and devastating fire powers. As soon as Enoch stepped onto the stage, the entire battlefield shifted, and it even announced, "Where I exist, everything burns." His presence alone forced the guardian of Igoli to summon the regulator. That should give you an idea of just how much of a threat Enoch is. Iji. This is the most powerful familiar of Shango that we have seen so far, and also the most powerful familiar in the entire Comet Republic series. Iji was first seen in the Visionary issue 4, where he was summoned by Shango as a manifestation of his ability to control the storms in a bid to counter the trump card of the Guardians of Igole, which was the Regulator, a giant statue that was made purely of stone and ancient magic. Shango summoned the largest of his familiar, Iji, to fight these stone giants. Iji is so unbelievably massive that his full form does not even enter into our level of perception, but part of his form and influence of his power can be felt by everyone around in this level of perception. Iji was able to stop the stone regulator's soul with his hands and completely restrict its movements. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see the whole fight between these two towering giants due to Ogu's interference, but I'm willing to pay good money that the regulator would have lost that fight. So, there you have it, the top 10 familiars of the Comet Republic. I do want to say though, this list is subject to change, as more information may come out about familiars featured in this list that might put them higher or lower in this list, or more familiars may be introduced that will be stronger than the ones listed here. So make sure to stay tuned and follow for more content. I'll continue to cover more about the Comet Republic and other Comet Republic characters.